On this channel, we talk a lot about identity transformation. We talk a lot about becoming the version of ourselves that we've always dreamed of becoming, and how when we do that, when we change our identity, we can change our reality. But I want to now mention a point that I don't know if I have before, and that is the vision of yourself, the person that you want to become, is often a reflection of who you were at a very young age before all of the conditioning that was applied to you. And what I mean by that is we want to be confident, we want to be carefree, we want to not care what people think about us. But don't you think when we were 5 years old, that was already the case? And if in your mind you're going to say, no, that wasn't the case, actually, I do remember always being shy. I remember always, being afraid of what people thought. There was a time in your life where you didn't care what people thought, even if you were quote unquote not conscious yet, even if you were 3 years old. There was a time when you didn't care what people thought, even if it's because you didn't really think much at all. But that's a more, far out example. But more so is we want to feel like a little kid again. And we have to be careful that as we're changing ourselves, we're doing so not out of the reach of becoming someone completely different. And we have to understand that if we still don't find a way to like the core part of what we bring to the table, then no amount of transformation is going to change that. And we can't depend on us becoming so radically different that all of a sudden we feel a different way about ourselves at a core. There needs to be at least some introductory level of self acceptance before any sort of change can happen. And this doesn't mean accept laziness. This doesn't mean accept the negative qualities that you have, but rather when you are portraying confidence, don't compare that confidence to the way it looks in another person. Some people walk around with a very silent, mature, emotionally stable confidence. Others walk around with an out there, goofy, very social confidence. It's a very different thing. And more than anything else, it's about the inner feeling that we feel inside of us. Maybe you don't even know how you're going to project yourself when you exist in a higher state of being. And I think that's a wonderful mystery to uncover. And if anything, that should serve as motivation for us becoming a version of ourselves that we can actually like. But yeah, a very important distinction is that what we're often looking for is going to be found in the parts of ourselves that were either shunned away from us or repressed from the people around us and the environments around us. We oftentimes have to go into that dark place and make light of it in order to become the person that we actually want to be. And what we're going to find is two things. Number one, we're going to find a childlike sensation that exists inside of us when we're actually in alignment. When you're playing a sport and you're in the flow, or when you're listening to music, you're in the flow, whatever it is, when you feel very light, when you feel very giddy, it's as if you feel like a kid because you are existing in that state of being. You're existing and you're experiencing what it's like to be emotionally free, what it's like to not be conditioned into feeling a certain way, what it's like to not have so many questions and requirements for happiness. That's what you're experiencing. And that's why children can be happy, is because they have not yet learned that there are requirements for happiness. And so they can simply enjoy existence itself. And I'm not saying it's easy. It's a very hard thing to, have every day. I don't think the point is to have it every day. I think also another thing to accept is that not every day is going to look like that. Even if you think to the best time of your life, there were probably moments in there where things weren't all so great, but rather the overall encompassing emotion of that time was joy. But there were little moments in there where you didn't feel up to it. You didn't feel very confident. You felt tired, whatever it may be. There were times, even in the best moments of your life, that weren't all that pretty. So, what do I mean by the swag you're looking for is in the parts of yourself that you're avoiding? And I think it's because what makes you different is not inherently what makes you an outcast. And let me rephrase that in a better way. The qualities in yourself that you've avoided, the qualities of yourself that you're sort of self conscious about, whether it be a slight stutter or a little bit of awkwardness or a funny laugh, whatever it may be. It can be anything. Even though those are generic examples, come about it in any way, shape, or form to the parts of yourself that you're kind of unsure of how it would be received. If there were no limitations and you know for sure that the person in front of you wasn't judging you and you were just letting yourself be, think about how that would look like. How silly, how goofy, how weird, how awkward, how, childish, whatever it may be. We need to come back into that state and we need to embody that state because we're so used to and we're so conditioned in this societal game and world to all fit a certain mold. We're all trying to fit the too cool aesthetic. We're all trying to fit the I'm better than you aesthetic. But rather, the people who are really enticing, the people who are really magnetic, are the ones that are being themselves so unapologetically that it demands curiosity. When someone's walking around with so much self-value, when they really don't care what you think, you can't help but wonder, what is your life philosophy? What has your life been like in the past? What are your dreams? What are your aspirations? These questions come to mind because you can tell this person is unique. You could tell this person is authentic. So the answer that they're going to give you is probably going to be just that. Rather than when you see someone really trying to fit the mold, really not trying to go against the societal rules and the lines, you kind of know what to expect. So it's not about being as weird as you can, but rather it's about going into that place of yourself where there's not a care in the world, the silliest, weirdest, most awkward place of yourself, and finding a way to accept that as an over encompassing awareness. And I'll break that down in a more simple way. Here's a quick exercise that we can do, right? We can close our eyes and we can think about ourselves as a young kid. Imagine ourselves laughing, being loud, giggling, without a care in the world. We couldn't care less what the people watching us are thinking of us. We couldn't care less about being cool. We couldn't care less about the clothes that we were wearing. We couldn't care less about any of that. I want you to try to muster up and try to just envision what that feels like. What does that feel like? What comes to mind for me is it almost feels like running through a field on a beautiful day and you're just running and running and running. Maybe you're playing with your friends and you just feel this light and this warmth encompassing you. And now I want you to come to the realization right now that it is possible to experience this feeling again as an older adult or however old you are, whether you're coming into adulthood, whether you've been sustained in adulthood for a very long time. It doesn't really matter because it's not necessarily in this instance about coming into the inner child. It's coming in to all that's been suppressed as a result of the outside world. Maybe when you've overextended your interest and you push something away and you were punished for that. There's a social regime and a social currency that we've learned from. And it is in this that we have, quote unquote, lost our swag. And I guess let me reframe how I'm defining swag here. I'm defining swag by authenticity. I'm defining swag by an inherent, you know, coolness that you have from being yourself. Because if you're going to define having swag in a certain definition, then that's not really going to fit this experiment. Because in my opinion, I'm using the classic old-fashioned word of swag to represent an inherent authenticity that we have and that we bring everywhere that acts enticing. It acts as a sense of magnetism because we're not requiring from the world to tell us what is cool, what is not cool. We wear the clothes we want for the simple reason that we like them. We talk to people that we like for the simple reason that we like it. We're not looking to the outside world for taste. Because why would you? The outside world is a melting pot of taste. And for the most part, especially like on social media and stuff, what people like is often just a domino effect of the opinions of the people who got there earlier. We see how quick the internet can switch on people. We see how quick the internet can switch on trends. So why don't you just give up that whole paradigm? Because the internet is a reflection of society. It's the most hyper extreme reflection that we can sort of ponder on. But what it doesn't sort of represent is consciousness. It doesn't represent the unconscious communication between all of us. If we're looking at things in terms of a sort of conscious network, I like to think that we communicate within each other without even realizing it. When you look at someone, there's more than just what meets the eye. There's a sort of communication that happens deep within our unconscious where we're, in a way, showing another person what we're about before we even speak a word to them. And I'm not talking about your eyes, I'm not talking about your smile, I'm talking about your energy. And I'm talking about the way you view yourself is often reflected in the eyes of others. This might sound a little bit woo woo, and that's probably as far as in a spiritual sense that I'll get in this episode. But I like to think that sometimes you can tell someone's vibe, right? Like, how do we judge someone's vibe? If you're judging their clothes, you're not judging their vibe. If you're judging their facial hair and their hairstyle and whatever else, you're not judging their vibe. You're not judging their energy. You're judging the book. You're judging the cover. You don't really know what's going on way deep inside of them. So that's where I think the swag comes from. It's from going deep inside of ourselves. It's from going way, way into the depths of the darkness, to the ugliest of thoughts, to the darkest of emotions, to the most troubling of memories. And it's going deep within and accepting all of it as part of the human experience and saying to yourself, this is what makes me authentic. This is what makes me human. I accept the dark past. I accept that, for one, I am not my thoughts, but I'm not going to neglect that these thoughts come into my awareness. I have experienced and I will experience dark thoughts, but I do not align with them. Don't be afraid to get your hands dirty in your own mud. Don't be afraid to go into the dark parts of yourself psychologically and observe it, because just observing it allows a bit of acceptance. And I think when people are always looking outside for validation, when people are always looking to the world to tell them what to like and what not to like, it's because they haven't went deep within themselves. They're still searching for themselves in other people, in other trends, in hobbies, whatever it may be. They're constantly searching and searching and searching for something that's actually deep within them. And they don't want to go deep inside of them because they believe that if they witness their darkness, if they witness all those parts of themselves that were judged, embarrassed, and ridiculed in the past, they think that they're somehow going to become that person again. But what was so wrong with that person? What was so wrong with that person who didn't play their cards so close to their chest? What was so wrong with that person who wore their heart on their sleeve? I think we can embody the positives of that nature without letting it fully take over our life once again, where we're constantly self-sabotaging in a way where we're constantly trying to radicalize ourselves to force people to accept us. Because I think that's the opposite tangent. And we can go that way as well. The other end of the spectrum is where people will take this advice too far and they start to become such an extreme, niche version of themselves to the point where they're not pushing people away because they believe that everyone needs to accept every little part of themselves right at the first moment. But it's okay to reserve a little bit of yourself upon meeting someone. Just don't fake being something you're not. And we do this every day, right? When I say fake being someone you're not, I'm not targeting a specific audience. I'm talking about all of us. We do this absolutely every day. In some way, shape, or form, we are faking and performing in some sort of way that isn't completely authentic, and that's okay. If we were always completely authentic, we probably wouldn't be the kindest on a day where we're in a really bad mood. So it's okay to see that we kind of have to play along into the games of life, into the routines and conversational styles of life. But what we're always going to be searching for is something that is inside of us. And it's not something that you're going to find. It's more something that you come to terms with, you know? And this is what happens is people are looking for swag, people are looking for magnetism. It's the same thing, people are looking for happiness. They think that once they get it, it's going to always be around. But really, happiness comes in waves. And happiness isn't a sustainable emotion long term. You can't be happy every second of the day. Even that would get boring. In polarities, there exists experience. We have to realize that it's okay to be angry. It's okay to be sad. It's amazing to be happy. But we can't hold on to any of these things as a representation of our character. The emotions you experience are not a representation of who you are. The thoughts you experience are definitely not a representation of who you are. But these are temporary experiences happening within us. And if we can separate ourselves from that, we can see that we start to cultivate a sense of self-worth that goes beyond just what we experience inside of us. Let me elaborate upon that a little bit more. When we can separate from our emotions, we can start to see that that pulling on our mind and on our heart to find validation in the form of others' opinions. So if we liked a movie that 9 of our other friends didn't like, why are we afraid to be, the sore thumb that says, I like that movie? And it's because there's a certain threat there of being perceived in a certain way. But it's actually the opposite. What I've found in life, and I think a lot of people who have lived in certain ways have told me this, is that when you're not afraid to be a little bit confrontational with what you believe, when you're not afraid to, you know, say how you feel, you actually demand more respect. And you actually create yourself as an outlier. You actually create value within yourself. This doesn't mean be contrarian in absolutely every subject. It just means be honest. If you do enjoy something, enjoy it. If you do like something or someone, like them. It's okay. Stop looking to other people to tell you how to live your life. And I know we all want to think that this isn't us. We all want to think that we don't do this. But it's not about that. We all do it to an extent. Rather, it's catching us ourselves doing it and staying true to how we truly, I said true 2 times in a row, now 3 times in a row, whatever. But it's staying authentic to what we actually enjoy out of life. And that's going to create a magnetism. That's what's going to create confidence and swag, quote unquote. That word feels so weird in this context, but for title's sake and for concept's sake, I'll use it. There's nothing left. There's nothing else to do. There's no amount of clothes that are going to make you feel like the kind of person that you're looking for. They can help, they can elevate, but really who you're looking to be is going to be found in the parts of yourself that were shunned at a very young age, because you need to go to that place and you need to accept those qualities and you need to transform them. You need to alchemize them into something that you actually value. So turn your awkwardness into something flattering by owning it so authentically, so radically that it's actually quite charming because it's so real. When something is so real, when someone is so real about, how they go about things, it demands value because it's honest. And in a world full of people who are always trying to be in line with the masses, in a world full of people who are always trying to be one with the trend, in real life, in the real world, not the internet, having an opinion that is consistently truthful to who you are, having beliefs that truly represent the things that create your perspective is valuable. And people will sense this. This goes back to that sort of unconscious communication that I've talked about. When you're not afraid to be a little bit confrontational with how you feel, when you're not afraid to be a little bit confrontational with who you are, it demands value. This doesn't mean that we should seek confrontation. Actually, quite the opposite. Confrontation most of the time isn't needed. But if as a result of being yourself, being kind and whatever else, whatever else you're trying to be, if you're just being yourself, if that causes friction, don't run away from the friction and become someone else to avoid it. In standing true to who you are, you will fall into alignment. And that's what I think we're all looking for. That's the swag I think most of us are looking for. We become magnetic when we go into those dark parts of us and we accept it, we nurture it, and we transform it into something quite flattering to ourselves, unique. That's it for today's episode, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'm going to leave a link to my book down below if you want to check it out. And other than that, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. If you're listening on Spotify, thank you for listening as always. I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace.